welcome back to World War II Jeep and Rifle. I've gotten a lot of requests after showing some videos of this World War II gramophone used by the U.S. Army for a teardown to show some of the internals. And this is useful not just for restoration, but also for maintenance, especially to maintain the motor, which is like a clock spring winding underneath the turntable. And also we'll do a teardown of the reproducer. I'll show you some of the parts there that need to be replaced from time to time if there's wear and tear. Anyway, we'll get right to it. Okay, so I think the first thing we'll do is take a look at the reproducer. It's held onto the sound waveguide by a rubber gasket and a set screw. So I've taken the screw off, and now I'll carefully pull the reproducer off the waveguide. Okay, so here's the reproducer removed. All right, the cover over the reproducer, which is really just to protect the diaphragm, is held on by two screws. It looks like four, but two of the screws here only hold the diaphragm on, and the opening on the cover is free for those. So these two screws will give us access to look inside a little closer. Okay, now this might need just a little bit of persuasion. Okay, so if we look inside, you can see that where the needle attaches is connected through an arm to the center of the diaphragm, and the diaphragm is just a piece of foil, very thin metal. And as many of the listeners observed to some of my previous videos where there's a lot of buzzing in the playback, when I took this thing apart, I could see that the diaphragm had a crease in it, and the crease was much more pronounced before I mainly tried to smooth it out and restore its original shape, which has got various contours, and you can see. And on this side, where it amplifies into the waveguide and the sound box, there's also some evidence of crimping and distortion of the shape. So I think the ultimate would be to replace this diaphragm, and in another video I give you contact information for a great resource for parts and hardware, and I'll have to research that myself to see if I can find a replacement that looks like this diaphragm. All right, so there's the reproducer. Next we'll take the turntable off and get into the motor housing. All right, the operating instructions for this indicate that oiling should be done every 30 to 60 days with a good grade of motor oil, SAE 20 or mineral oil. Remove the turntable and the screws holding the motor board and oil where indicated. So the turntable comes off. There's this clasp here that I can get with my fingernails and pry it open. Then the turntable is kind of held in place by friction on the spindle. So with a little bit of effort, I pulled that off. And then we need to remove some of the screws that you see. Not all of them. These screws hold the the spring assembly in place, the motor underneath. We don't have to undo those, but we'll undo all these ones on the outside. And not every one of these gramophones is the same. They're some of them are arranged differently, but it's generally going to be all of the outside screws. These two, which screw into the horn assembly underneath and the sound box. So here we go. Okay, screws are out. Before I pull the motorboard off, a couple of interesting things to point out. One, if your crank is connected by a chain like mine is, be sure to pull it out of the motor box and stow it. Here is the brake, and the brake underneath the turntable normally is literally just a lever connected to a hunk of rubber, not rubber, leather. And that leather causes friction against the turntable and breaks it from moving. So, you know, it's a very simple design. And next, to get the motorboard off, rather than sticking a screwdriver in the side and prying and kind of damaging it, I like to just kind of find a way to grapple it and open it up. So let's just look underneath here for a second, because the waveguide from the reproducer channels the sound vibrations through this horn box, and this is like paper mache cardboard. This is just a cardboard box, and you can see how it's kind of got a horn shape, and that creates the amplification so that the sound that comes out the back through this delicate mesh is louder than the natural vibrations alone would be. So that's kind of how it works without electricity or anything like that. So okay, now we'll just take a look underneath here. See how well this shows up. But this assembly, this clock spring, basically has two spring canisters, and both of these together provide a smooth, continuous RPMs as much as possible over the range of the tension in the springs. And it said oil where indicated, and I don't see a whole lot of oil here indications. So when I've done this in the past, I did a thorough cleaning on this originally once I bought it, and then oiled it where it looked like it obviously could use oil, like at some of these bearing locations. And that's what I'll go ahead and do, is I'm going to do a quick wipe down just to get some excess off, and then put a very conservative amount of oil on a few of the gears and contact points, so that this thing is good to go for another 30 to 60 days. So, you know, no manufacturer's markings on the outside, but this clock winding says Majestic. The General Industries, Elyria, Ohio, USA, Majestic. So that could be useful to know. And I'm going to go ahead and completely remove this from the motorboard. All right, there is a speed adjustment arm that you have to also deal with before you can drop the thing out of the motorboard. This speed adjustment arm is attached with a screw clamp. So I've loosened that, and hopefully I can condense it. Yes. Okay. Set that aside. And now here's the rest of the story. A couple of shims that I'll need to make sure I can realign and keep in place. And this gives me more access to areas to clean and oil. Not too much. One more try at this tricky spot right here with some clockmakers or jeweler's oil. There we go. Okay, that was probably hard to watch. Next, I'll drop this back into the chassis. One suggestion is, although tightening the motor screws to the motorboard should be pretty snug, the rest of these screws you need to be a little bit more gentle with, because they're going into that paper mache or cardboard horn in the case of this screw, which can't take a whole lot of strain, so barely get it snug, and the rest of them are going into pretty old wood. So suggest you be gentle. Okay. Make sure everything is in the right spots. Turntable back on. Better friction. And this keeper. And just scratch the felt. Okay. Okay, got it all screwed back together. Let's just make sure we have smooth turntable action. Okay, great. I'll let that wind down to relax the springs for storage, and then button her up. Until the next time, bring her out to play.